What's up, AP Psych? Welcome back. We're on to our next theory of personality in our personality theories unit. We're moving on from Freud, psychoanalytic and psychodynamic theories, and we're going to get into the humanistic perspective here. Being a little stereotypical here with the rainbows and like happy thoughts here of the humanistic perspective. But if it helps you remember it, that's great. And it also correlates a little bit with the time period that the theories were put forth. So we'll get into a couple other psychologists that are going to be good to remember going forward. And hopefully you'll also remember them from Unit 8 when we touched on a couple of the ideas in that unit as well. So first up, the theorists that we need to focus on are Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. We talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs when we talked about the motivation unit. We'll come back to that, touch on it again here with the humanistic perspective. This is the 1960s. And some psychologists had become, a little unhappy or discontented with Freud's negativity and his psychoanalytic perspective. So they wanted to take a route that was a little bit more optimistic about human personality. And they also were a little bit unhappy with the mechanistic psychology of the behaviorists and thinking that, we're all pawns that can be controlled by rewards and punishments and observational learning and things like that. So they disagreed with those things, and they moved away from Freud's dark, sexual, and aggressive unconscious urges. They moved more toward psychology, towards a more positive view of humanity. So in the 60s, they started to emphasize the idea that we as individuals control our own behavior, not our environment, not our genetics, not other people. We can control our own behavior. And that's the humanistic approach, and that views human nature in a much more positive light, and believes that we're all innately good and we're all striving to be our best selves. We're all striving to become what they call self-actualized. It was a very popular perspective at the time because it was so person-centered. And we're talking about the 1960s counterculture movement, anti-Vietnam peace movements, thinking of those societal ideas. It's like, yeah, man, let's all live in harmony, let's all love one another and love ourselves and help the world progress. And that societal ideas influence the humanistic theory, definitely. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We touched on this with motivation, like I said, but Abraham Maslow had the hierarchy where we would move up through these levels of the pyramid to reach self-actualization. We wouldn't be able to move through them without first achieving the needs or meeting the needs in each stage. Okay? So you have physiological needs, breathing, food, water, sleep, homeostasis, safety, security, employment, love and belonging, friendship, family, relationships, esteem needs, self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others. And then you can reach self-actualization, where you are performing, acting as your best self. And humanists would argue that we are all in some way trying to achieve this self-actualization and in a sense, become the best that we can be. And that's the positive spin that these humanists added, right? We're not being driven by some dark, obscure, unconscious mind. We're making conscious choices to try to become our best selves. So that's Maslow's hierarchy. We've touched on that before. And ultimately, the belief behind that, like we just said, you're trying to reach self-actualization to fulfill our potential as a human being. So he believed that this desire exists in all people, but it could be often thwarted by one's environment or things like that. Okay, so what does a self-actualized person look like? They accept themselves unconditionally, right? They're not putting unnecessary constraints or expectations on themselves. They accept themselves the way they are. They're spontaneous and natural. Right? They go through life and they do the things that they enjoy, and they're genuine people. They have a democratic nature that discuss issues and come to agreements between others in society rather than just doing things their own way. But they also like privacy. So they're not out there posting their entire lives on social media looking for the approval of others. Very humble, a lot of humility, and just living life that way. They can focus on problems outside of themselves. Okay? One of the biggest critiques of humanism is that it focuses too much on the self. Well, Abraham Maslow says to be self-actualized, you have to worry about others outside of just yourself as well. They have a strong ethical and moral sense, and they have a small but close group of friends, and they're very realistic in life about things they can achieve and can't achieve, and what they can do on a day-to-day basis. So that's the characteristics of a self-actualized person, according to Abraham Maslow. Our second psychologist in this personality theory is Carl Rogers. He also believed in self-actualization and in individual personal growth, and that people are naturally good. But he focused instead on the pyramid. He focused on the idea of self-concept, and that as the central feature of your personality. Right? Self-concept is our perception of our abilities, our behaviors, and our characteristics. If your self-concept is positive, you tend to act in positive ways. Do you see yourself as positive, as a benefit to society, things like that? So to achieve a positive self-concept and become fully functioning, according to Rogers, right, you need three things. Genuineness, you need to be open with your feelings, not put up walls and lie to people and be fake. You need to be as genuine as possible. Right? 2, you have to have acceptance. Accepting yourself is huge. We'll talk about self-efficacy and self-worth. Right? You have to get rid of conditions of worth, and these are conditions that people place on you or you place on yourself in order to qualify yourself as successful or feel worthy. You need to let go of those and not let other people place them upon you. And at the same time, you have to offer unconditional positive regard to others. Right? You're accepting yourself as you are and loving yourself, but you're also not placing these conditions of worth on other people, regardless of their faults, and you're accepting them unconditionally. So we have genuineness, acceptance, and finally empathy, where we can share and mirror our feelings and reflect meanings within others and see ourselves in others and share their thoughts and feelings as well. Okay, so that's how you could become fully functioning and have a positive self-concept, according to Rogers. We're talking about assessing this. So to determine if you are fully functioning and have a positive self-concept, Rogers would ask you to do two things. He would assess your personality, and he would ask you what your ideal self would be. Describe your ideal self, and then he would ask you to describe your real self, or how you are right now. Okay? If your ideal self and real self, if the two descriptions were close, you'd have a positive self-concept. Right? You're living the way you want to be living. You are the person that you think you should be. Okay? If there's a gap between the I should, your ideal self, and the I am, your real self, Rogers would say that you're an incongruous person, and you need to work on those three elements of growth: genuineness, acceptance, and empathy, in order to reach fully functioning positive self-concept. Okay, so to evaluate this humanistic perspective, it has had a huge impact on things like counseling, education, child rearing, and management because of its positivity and the way they encourage people to accept themselves and strive to be their best. It's a really great approach. The drawback, of course, when you're talking about individual people and their own self-concepts and their own thoughts, it can be vague and it can lack subjective scientific research and basis. Okay, so that's always a critique on the humanistic side of things. And individualism, the emphasis on individualism, can lead people to be self-centered, selfish, and self-indulge. So as a humanist, you have to be careful of your emphasis, that you're emphasizing, yes, the self and self-growth and self-love, but there's also pieces of empathy and accepting others and a democratic nature involved as well. So you cannot fall into the trap of focusing solely on yourself with the humanistic perspective. Okay? So those are a few critiques. And that was a quick one, but that wraps up what we need to know about the humanistic perspective. Maslow and Rogers, and we'll do some things in class to assess your self-concept and to work again with the hierarchy of needs. As usual, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in class.